In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up your settings within Libsyn so you can get your show ready for launch. When you log into your dashboard, it's mostly going to be blank and everything you need is going to be in your settings section. Once you click on the settings section, you're going to see a lot of different options. What we want to get into in this video is just your podcast settings. In the podcast settings section, this is where you're actually going to add things like your artwork, your title, your description, and all of that good stuff. So if you haven't finished your pre-podcast survey or pre-podcast intake form, make sure you finish all of those steps first because you can't actually complete this process until you have all of that information on hand. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks along the way, so make sure to take some notes. Here in the title section, it's automatically going to be whatever you entered when you first signed up for Libsyn. And so you can actually rework this section to make sure that you're getting max exposure as far as discoverability and SEO goes. One thing you can do with your title is add this quick pipe right here. That's what this symbol is called. If you don't know where that pipe is located, it's right above the return key. You'll have to hit Shift to execute it, but it's located right there. That creates a little bit of visual separation within your title because here's what you're going to do next. If you have a short podcast title, you can actually add something additional to the title that can help with SEO. So for example, this is a health and wellness show. So if I wanted to add one or two more keywords to the actual title itself, I could simply do that here. Maybe people are looking for health tips. So now in the podcast apps, anybody that's searching health tips might find it along with the people that are searching for the actual podcast title. Or maybe you just want to tell people what the show is going to be. You could do health coaching or life coaching or whatever your niche and industry is. Since this show has an acronym, I'm just going to explain what the acronym is. But add one or two keywords. Don't go crazy with this process because you can actually get flagged. They call it keyword stuffing. So definitely don't abuse this. But if you can add one or two bonus keywords, you might as well take up that digital real estate, if you will, with something searchable that could help people find your show. Here in the description section is where you're going to add, of course, your description. Make sure that your description has a good hook and lets people know what the show is going to be about. People that look at the description are people that don't want to necessarily hit play and dive into your content just yet. They're trying to learn more about the show and see if they even want to. So if you can help people make a decision to hit that play button and dive into your content from your description, it's going to lead to more downloads and listens overall. So don't skip being intentional with this step. Next, you can add your artwork. Remember, there are specific rules, dimensions, and sizes that you have to follow within the podcast space. So if you haven't already checked out the artwork training, make sure to do that because artwork is one of the number one reasons why people actually get taken down in the podcast space is having the wrong artwork dimensions, sizes, or just not following the protocol correctly. Next, you'll select your categories. There's a wide variety of categories, and you can see that there's some categories with this little arrow and a subcategory or just the main category itself. That's how it's going to be throughout this whole list. So for example, if you go to business, maybe your first category could be general business. And then if you're more on the investing side of things, you could do business and then specifically business investing. The same thing with health. You might be in health and fitness, but specifically, you might be talking about mental health. You can also add a category/subcategory as your first category if you wanted to niche down even more. Try not to put yourself in conflicting categories. If you're in sports as your second category, but you're in arts as your first category, it might send some conflicting messages to the algorithm. So try to make sure your two categories are somewhere in the ballpark of each other. Now, one thing I will say about these categories is these are just suggestions to places like Apple. So if you select the leisure and automotive department, but what you're actually talking about is government stuff, your content will be moved to other categories. And even if you select it here in the settings, that doesn't mean that you're going to stay there. If they feel like your content is better hosted in a different category, they'll move you there and never let you know. So again, these are just suggestions. So make sure you're strategic and accurate with what you're selecting on here. Next, you're going to add your owner name. Your owner name should be the host name. or your company name. Your owner email will need to be something that you don't mind having out publicly. So if you want a info account or an admin account to be here, that might be strategic versus your personal email being out to the world. The next is the author tag. The author tag is one of the only searchable areas in all of the podcast apps. So you can be a little bit strategic in this section, just like you were with the title. So the author should simply be your name, but you can do a little bit extra here, like you do in the title. You can add one or two extra keywords. So if this were my podcast all about podcasting, I would put Cassie Atkins as the author tag and then podcast tips. So anybody who looks for podcast tips or podcast training or my name, that's going to show up first. Again, don't use and abuse this. Add 1 to 2 words max. The next is going to be your website URL. Libsyn automatically generates a website for you. It's very simple and basic. Just host your main episodes, and that's really it. You can customize it if you want to, but having a more strategic website built out, whether that be a full WordPress site or a funnel or something just quick and easy landing page or something like that, that's going to be a better option. So put your website URL that you want to drive traffic to from your podcast here in this section. Release frequency. You actually don't have to select this, but if you know your category already, go ahead and put it out there. Maybe you have a weekly show, twice monthly, a monthly show, whatever it is. Or if you only have a serial show like a season only show, then that's what you would select here. Most of you are going to be weekly. Third-party content. Make sure that your content has no third-party content whatsoever and select the right option. Next, you're going to select the type, either episodic or serial. This means, do people need to consume your show in order from episode 1 to 2 to 3? Or can they dive into episode 27 and then go back to 6 or 8? And it's still going to be a good listening experience. If you have a story that you need to tell part by part or a training process, they need to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, all the numbers through, you would select serial. If it doesn't matter when they come in and they're just jumping into your world and clicking on all the episodes and interviews, go episodic. The explicit section is pretty self-explanatory. Is your show going to have a lot of cursing or is it going to be clean? Now, some explicit content, if you're depicting graphic violence or assault or things like that, you might be put into the explicit category due to the nature of the content. But if you don't plan on having anything like that or any cursing, leave it as clean. The language field will be the language that the content is actually being spoken in. So you can see that there's different types. Even though you're English, maybe you might be speaking English or maybe you might be speaking Spanish, there's still specific regions you can select. So if you are speaking English, but your show is in the Philippines or in the United Kingdom, go ahead and select the correct area as well. So you'll be targeted at the right audience. If you accidentally select something that's outside your language, say I accidentally selected I was going to be speaking Japanese, my content will be put towards a Japanese market. And of course, they won't be able to understand me because I'm speaking English, right? So make sure you're not just picking the exact language you're speaking in, but the region as well. Episode display limit is something you absolutely do not want to skip over when you are setting up your podcast. It's automatically going to be at 300, and we're going to change that to 0. Episode display limit means how many of your episodes are actually going to be displayed within the app. So if you only have 10 here for some reason, in your podcast apps like Apple or Google or wherever people are listening, they're only going to be able to see your most recent 10 episodes. If you had 100 selection, they wouldn't be able to see anything past your last recent 100 episodes. So leaving it at 0 will inevitably lead to more downloads in the long run because you're not limiting the amount of content that people can consume. The copyright section will be just whatever year you are in. If you have a copyright affiliated with your business and your podcast name is also your business name, you can add your business copyright date. Next, you're going to select Include in Directory. This is going to add your show into the Libsyn directory with all the other Libsyn hosted shows, and you're ready to go. All you have to do now is just hit save.